Agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Patty Esser. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Before a moment of silence, I want to announce that Patricia Brown, who was a school board member in Sumner County, a longtime school board member, passed last night. She was a 30-plus year career teacher in Sumner County, and she retired in 2002. So she's been a school board member since 2014. So if you remember her family, her daughter, and I can't remember her name, her daughter is the mayor of Gallatin. So if you remember the Patricia Brown family. Okay, any questions on the consent agenda?
Recognition Thursday.
Thursday night, okay. No visitors tonight? Okay, so number 8.
All right, number 8, instruction, tab 2, so adoption of the charter schools performance framework pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated 49-13-143. If a chartering authority has not adopted a performance framework for all its schools, it must adopt a performance framework aligned to the Tennessee Department of Education's model performance framework for charter schools. The RCS performance framework is aligned to both the state model and the framework used by the Tennessee Public Charter Commission. It also reflects updates that we made to the state framework later this year. Our schools follow our state accountability protocol since we're chartering our own. This is our first school that we're actually chartering outside of our traditional schools. This is the first time that we've had this. Dr. Bullard, do you want to come up and anything you want to add to this? I asked her to be here just in case we had questions, but this is customary for it to be for our first time to have this.
So this performance framework is a model after the Tennessee Department of Education framework. If we choose not to adopt one model after theirs, we do have to adopt one for all of our schools, including our traditional schools. So most authorizers do choose to adopt the performance framework that the state offers. This reflects the changes that are made. So there is, you'll see a comparison on there between the district performance and the charter schools performance, which is an update as well as an opportunity for the charter school to provide a mission-specific goal, which they have done. Do you have any questions for me?
Nice to see you.
All right, and the second goes right along with that. The charter agreement with Springs Public Schools TNM Power Academy in accordance with Board Policy 1.902. An agreement has been drafted between Rutherford County Schools and Springs Public Schools TNM Power Academy. The purpose of this agreement is to articulate the rights and responsibilities of each party regarding school autonomy, funding, administration, and oversight, outcomes, and more. The agreement will be effective for 10 years unless it's otherwise amended or revoked per board policy. The exhibits of this agreement include the RCS performance framework, a pre-opening checklist detailing the school's responsibility prior to their first year serving students, and a list of approved waivers from the Tennessee Department of Education. The charter application, which was previously approved by the school board, can be viewed in its entirety in the school board meeting agenda from July 18th, 2022. And because that was several hundred pages, to not include it to the tab, it's included in that. It was approved in July, but everything else is here.
Any questions? Okay, number 9.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Floyd. All right, number 9, special education. Just to give you some background, this was approved on December 15th, but the wording for this was only for one position. When in looking at it, we really were requesting 3. Director of schools, I cannot authorize any new positions. I can transfer and move open positions around in that, but I can't approve new positions. So this is just coming back and asking to approve the 2 other positions that should have been included the first time. So the special education department requests 2 additional physical therapist positions under direct supervision of our special education coordinator. These physical therapist positions are currently being moved to Rutherford County Schools from previously being funded through a private contractor. These additional positions will allow us to have better coverage across the districts and will be funded through IDEA Part B funds.
Any comments or questions?
Are those funds recurring funds?
IDA is, so they changed just a little bit based on, like, we had our Title I funds go down, but then our IDA funds went up, so, yes.
But we're still not funded.
No, not
Like
even
they
close.
Promised to us about 45 plus years ago. So that's a whole nother one.
So then, for the budget for next year, well, 2023, 24, then we will have to add that to the budget, correct?
They'll be in the, so this is part of the federal funds that we do as part of E-Plan, and so you're probably not going to see those unless we go through a detailed account of how we're doing each one in the federal.
Okay, I just want to know.
No,
how
good
to
question.
count.
Very good question.
That's all.
Number 10.
Number 10, legal tab 3. So the first one's add a county transfer student. Number 1, the board's been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. The student was expelled for possession of illegal drugs. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admission of any student except those in state custody when a student transfers from another school system while under suspension or expulsion. Director of Schools' recommendation is deny admission, and if you have any further questions, you can see Ms. Ridley on that one too.
Everyone has a folder, so any questions or comments? Please call Ms. Ridley if you have anything specific, student specific.
And then number 2, add a county transfer student 2. So again, the board's been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. Student was sent to alternative school for continued violations of school rules. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admissions of any student except those in state custody when a student transfers from another school system while under suspension or expulsion. So again, my director of schools recommendation is to deny admission. This student has not been expelled. This student is suspended at the alternative school currently.
Number 11.
All right, number 11, facilities and construction, tab 4. So we'll start with transportation. So Allison Brown has been the contractor of Bus 61 for the Rutherford County Board of Education since 7/6/2015. Bus 61 has not been running the route that was awarded. Per section 8.4, in the event of a material breach of this contract, the board may immediately suspend this contract. The contractor shall immediately resolve the material breach to the satisfaction of the board. In the event of a breach of this contract by the contractor, the board may, within its sole discretion, terminate this contract by giving 30 days notice. The board's failure to terminate this contract upon breach shall not constitute a waiver of the board's right to terminate for subsequent violations or failure to adequately fulfill the contract obligations. On the next page, you'll see no breach of this contract on the part of a breaching party shall be deemed material unless the party claiming such breach shall be given the other party written notice of the breach, and said party shall fail to cure the breach within 30 days after receipt of such notice. Allison Brown has received a 30-day written notice of this breach of contract. Allison Brown's failed to adequately fulfill the contract obligations. And to give you just a little bit of background around bus contracting, so we contract with our contractors, then they find drivers. And so what the contractor does to find the drivers isn't necessarily in our purview. That is really up to the contractor. In this situation, we have Bus 61 who has not had a driver driving that bus. So we had 30 days notice. Actually gave a little bit more than 30 days notice. Still, that bus is not being served contract. So at this point, we're moving to terminate that contract. Mr. Lee, anything you want to add to that?
No, sir. This is one of those things that carried over from last year under a previous director, and Wanda was not aware of it, and fortunately it fell through the cracks. And we became aware of the situation back in November. We've been working with the contractor just like we have with all of our contractors. We try and give them, as we all know, drivers are at a shortage, parts are at a shortage. What started this was the contractor had a wreck of the bus. They have not been able to secure the parts. When they did, they couldn't acquire a driver. So it's been a kind of a twofold. We've been working with them, and we've been using, they've been using one of their own buses, another bus that they have to cover part of the route. There's been a couple of other drivers that have pitched in to help cover the route to get these children to school. And we got to the point 30 days ago that we just weren't getting satisfaction, and that's when we sent the letter to the contractor to let them know that we were taking this step.
Are we seeing more and more of these type situations?
There's 4 on the front that were voluntary terminations. 2 of those are kind of similar. We kind of gave them the option of us taking the route or them turning it in. and it ebbs and flows. We have a couple of contractors that were not able to secure drivers that wanted to grow, and they have not taken new contracts, but the last couple of ones that we've put out, those contractors have been able to find people. So it's a yes and a no. There was part of the year we were struggling. Then there's another part of the year that we've done pretty good. We've had 4 on the consent agenda that were voluntary terminations. We feel pretty confident that 2 or 3 of those are what I would call routes that a number of people would be interested in. So it's a yes and a no. The thing that we're really going to be struggling with shortly is sped buses. Our contract is based on a certain size of a sped bus because that's what the vast majority of them have. We've been talking to the manufacturers that make these buses. They're not making the chassis for them. So we are right now looking at alternatives. We may have to come back with an addendum to the contract for a bus that's slightly smaller and a bus that's slightly larger. The advantage to the slightly larger bus is we could put 2 wheelchaired students on one bus, whereas right now we can't. We don't have route payment scales for those buses, but it's something we can work out. But we're looking for alternatives going forward because the bus itself is going to, I think, going to become the next problem as they age out is getting new buses or used buses that are still inside that age.
In a situation kind of like this, do we make any kind of notification in the file that the driver did not come to us and notify us that they could not fulfill the contract?
Normally we would, yes. And like I said, this one fell through the crack, but we found it in November. We've been working with this contractor for a little while. We should have known at the start of the year. The answer to your question is yes, we should have known. But with the new compliance person that we have now, that's part of their new responsibilities, is to help keep track of that so that we can address them at the start of the year.
Yeah, I understand our failure, but I also think there's some responsibility on the driver. The driver should have come to us and said.
I don't disagree. And sometimes we had that conversation. We had a bus drivers committee meeting today, just happened to be today. And one of the things that we discussed with those drivers is that it is a two-way street and that when they have a problem, they cover the route. It's in their contract. It's their responsibility to cover the route. Well, if you're using 2 other buses to cover your route, your buddies, and they're helping you out, your financial agreement is between you and them. We don't want to get involved in that part. But you owe us a phone call. You're supposed to notify us to tell us so that we know what bus is picking up what child. If they're picking up a certain section of that route, then we're going to send out school messengers so that those parents know 61's not picking up your child, 150 is. And it's only going to be this way for a couple of weeks, and if something changes, we'll let you know. That was one of the things we discussed with them today is they have to get better at communicating with us. Even though your contract says that, you still got to let us know. And we're in the bus drivers, Wanda and them have started, they send out once a month a newsletter. We're going to make that part of that newsletter, and we're also going to send out some other things to remind them. It's not just your responsibility to cover it, but it's your responsibility to let us know how you're covering it so that we can let the parents know. And I think sometimes it's not intentional. They think they're doing their job and they're trying to, but I do agree there's some lack of communication from them coming back to us as well.
And to Corey's point, with going back to the whole communication aspect of it, so I'm in a route with my son for where he's at school, where he was I don't know, I really don't know the logistics, so I cannot speak to that. But what I can say is that school starts at 8:30, and he's leaving my house at 8:10, 8:15, because the bus is going to pick him up at 8:20 because it's a later bus. And then this year, at the start of the school year, on the very first day, it was there was no notification, no nothing. He goes to the bus stop. Apparently, they got a new driver for that new bus route, and the bus came early when it was supposed to come, but 3 or 4 months prior to that, it was coming late. And so, thankfully, there was arrangements made for him to go to school. But the point is, the lack of communication, parents didn't know that the bus was going to be actually on time when the start of the school of the year. And I'm sure there were other parents who went through that similar situation where their kids left later thinking that it was going to come, but they already missed the bus, which I'm glad that they got a driver for the route, but the miscommunication needs to be worked on. So I'm glad that we're on the know and that you're pushing that, and we really need to strive to push and do better on that regard, on that front end.
And on the other side, I've seen on the north end, bus drivers that weren't going to be able to make their route have put it on Facebook to tell the parents of that particular route that they would. I know it's not something that we don't want to talk about, or that we want to talk about, privatizing the buses. Are we anywhere near that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know things have been so
Right now,
hard,
we've got
so-
coverage.
Okay.
And so I have not pursued any options at all this year.
Yeah, I know that's something we don't want to do, but at some point, if we have to do that,
We're in better shape than most.
okay, all right, fair enough.
All right, next, so we have land update. The first one is the Beatty property, and so testing progress and due diligence. So Mr. Lee gave you guys a letter from the city of Murfreesboro. So I wanted to go over a couple things. This is one connected to the Beatty property, but also just something that we deal with being a local government agency, but also having our schools within 4 different municipalities. And so we've had some issues over the last year as far as with permitting, pulling permits, conflicting information that have slowed some of our projects down. Oakland, Riverdale are a good example of things that have been slowed down because of going through some of that process. This seems to be another one. We've had some other buildings that have been a little bit of an issue as far as even getting electrical permits pulled. You guys have seen recently an email about possibly annexing part of our buildings in the Rockville area. And so that doesn't necessarily give us any benefit whatsoever. Outside of, we would then have to go through the permit process for those buildings. And so this is another example. So there's also, without getting into the details of it, we have an Attorney General's opinion from 2000 that we would probably want to get updated, but just to make sure that it was still applicable, that we are still within line as a county agency to do what we need to do. We go to the city of Laverne, Smyrna, and Eagleville to tell them what we're doing, just out of being a good neighbor, but it's not something that we require all of their planning committees to approve. We do that in the city of Murfreesboro, and at some point, if the relationship keeps going this way, I do see us having to maybe take that hard stance as well of saying, why are we doing this for one municipality but not the others? Trey, hopefully I set that up for a softball for you as best as I possibly could to go over that.
Beatty property, the letter from the city there, basically we sent a will serve letter, which is part of our due diligence to Murfreesboro Water and Sewer. They have responded. The short version is we are an out-of-city customer, is the way they refer to us, at Rockvale, Buchanan, Plainview, and I think that's it right now for the city of Murfreesboro, but we're outside the city, and their ordinances allow that. They're requesting that we, before they will give us an answer on sewer, that we request annexation. They're basically saying we're not going to talk to you as an outside the city contractor or customer. And then it also states that that area was studied some years back for capacity. They had no intention or have no intention or ability to expand that system out there. So they had allotted whatever capacity they have for residential development in that area, and if they were to allow us to tie on, they could potentially lose some of their capacity. for these residential developments. Now, it's not a whole lot. Shelton Farms is gobbling up the large majority of what's a sewer that's available out there. And they do make the statement that once we have made application, they will also, part of their requirement is to have the property tested to see if the soil is conducive enough to have a standalone sewer system, which we have some of those. We've done that in the past. And then they'll make the determination on whether we get sewer or not after they've annexed us. We can do the testing ourselves, which we have to either way, now to find out. I hadn't planned on that because I thought we had worked out an agreement to get sewer. And I know nothing's hard and fast, and there was nothing formalized and that sort of thing. So maybe we go ahead and do that to see what the soil looks like. If we find out that it is acceptable, it's possible that we may have to have a couple of more acres of land to build the sewer system. We can approach Mr. Beatty with that, and then decide whether we want to apply for annexation or not. The board wants to apply for annexation, I'll send a letter tomorrow. But that's basically what this letter says. We are in the process of all of our other testing. Phase 1 environmental, Mr. Reed sent some documents over to the owner, and he got those back to us very quickly, so that's ongoing. The boring started the first of this week to check for rock and verify that there's no caves and that kind of thing. We started our traffic study. We met with the consultant, and I met virtually with the county engineers last week, had a very good meeting. So they know what the county's expecting and what they're looking for, so they've got that process started. The wetland study is supposed to start Friday. Won't take but 2 or 3 days. He's already done his in-house work. Now he's got to go do the field part, and he'll do that. The boundary survey work has also already begun. So I think we're in good shape on all of these tests by our due diligence date. So that's kind of where we are on the Beatty property.
How much more will it cost to do that sewer testing?
I'd probably say $6,000 to $10,000.
How much?
$6,000 to $10,000.
Oh,
I don't have a firm quote, but that's what we've paid in the past.
And how long, what's the time frame?
Typically takes about 4 to 6 weeks.
So if we are annexed, that means that we have to pay, if we build a school there, we have to pay the shared funds, correct?
No, the shared funds would be paid whether we're in the city limits or out of the city limits. That part doesn't. Well, if we were annexed, we would have to, everything that we built, we would go through their permit processes and pay all the fees.
There'd be additional fees.
Quite a bit of money. Right now, we don't pay those fees. We do pay to all the utilities, tap fees, connection fees, impact fees, those kind of things, and that's fair. I think we should, because we are increasing their infrastructure and what they've got to sewer-wise take care of. Have no problem. We pay that to all the municipalities. What we don't do in the county and the other cities is we submit our drawings, we meet with them, and if they have things that they would like us to do, City of Smyrna asked us to move a fire hydrant, you know, to meet some of their local we have no problem doing those kind of things. When it comes time to build it, we still work with their inspectors. We don't pay their permit fees, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we still work with all City of Smyrna. When we run sewer line that's going to be turned over to them, their inspectors still come. They still do the inspections. We work with them to make sure they're getting what they're supposed to get. In the city of Murfreesboro, we have to pay for all those permits and go through the process.
And we will have to go through their timeline for those permits,
Yes.
which can also hold up a lot of things on that end. How much do you think roughly will it cost to do those permits? I don't know what they are, but
I can have a number for you by Thursday night.
Okay, that'll be great, if you can give us a number. And also, if we were to do the sewer testing, will it be within that timeline that we have to meet that contingency? Because it has to be done before that contingency, because then that will be the immediate need to do it within that time frame to meet within that expiration date.
I think it can be. I have not talked to anybody today. I did leave a message for a couple of firms. They did not call me back. I expect to hear from them tomorrow. But I think it can be done in the time frame that we're looking at.
So how is this different from the Rockville Middle School?
Rockville Elementary, Middle, and High, and I'm going to use we collective to mean the county as a whole. When the property at Rockville was purchased in 07, 08, somewhere in that time frame, there was no sewer out there. The county paid to run the sewer from about Veterans Parkway all the way to Rockville. $3.5, $4 million. I don't remember the exact number. That's fairly close. The county paid for that so that we could build the schools and then gave it to the city of Murfreesboro.
And so now when they're asking for that piece of property to be annexed, we're being opting out of going through any permits because they're requesting
Well, right now,
for that side, for Rockville.
for Rockville, if their study, yes. If they annexed us in, and let's say the projects that we just finished, the addition and annex at Rockville Elementary and the additions we did at the middle school, we didn't pay permits for those because they were in the county. If we had been annexed, we would have had to go through the process and pay the fees.
But this time around, they're pushing us, and so therefore they're...
By state law, they can't force us
Right,
to be
they're
annexed.
requesting.
They're doing it as a study. Why, I don't know, but they're doing a study is what I'm told.
So if we go with the annexation, then we can tie into the system, right? And
We don't
Not
know.
necessarily.
We don't know. On page 2, they say, annexation is not a guarantee of getting sewer service. I think what they're saying is we're going to require you to do the testing, and if the soil comes back good, we're going to annex you, but you're going to have to build your own sewer system. If the soil comes back bad, then they're going to say, we'll annex you and give you sewer.
how much is the standalone system?
That's
said
crazy.
It would be
Plus the acreage, right?
plus the acreage. It would be comparable in cost to what it would take us to tie into the sewer. I have not done a complete analysis, but I could probably have some numbers in a week or so.
Is one way more efficient than the other? I mean, we talking
One
about
has where we become on the hook of dealing with the state by being a owner. What we've done with all of our others is we've built them and turned them over to CUD to operate. We'd have to talk to CUD to make sure they'd be willing to take it, but the last one we built, which was at Browns Chapel, we built it and they took it over, they operate it. We pay a fee just like anybody else. We paid to put it in, and then we turn it over to them to run. It's no different than us putting in the sewer system at Rockville and turning it over to the city. It's kind of a comparable thing. The only one that we managed still was Buchanan Elementary, and it discharged directly into the river. And it was very old and becoming a real problem. And through capital projects last year, we finished a project to tie it into the city sewer at Whitworth Buchanan. So that got us off that system. So now we do not own any systems ourselves now. We have built them and turned them over to CUD, similar to what we would do with the sewer. Because everything that we put in, water and sewer on our grounds, if it's above a certain size, we as a developer put it in. and then we give it to CUD or give it to Smyrna Utilities or, Laverne, whoever the municipality is, we build it and give it over to them. And then when it gets to the last manhole before our building, from there into the building belongs to us.
Will you be able to provide to us what the permits are that we'll have to go through so that we will be aware of what the headaches will be?
Going through, yeah, I can tell you what we're going through now.
Can you explain some of the headaches we're going through right now with Riverdale and Oakland?
Well, they're going to treat us no differently than they treat anybody else. So, this Riverdale and Oakland both were built in the city. They don't have irrigation. Got nice landscaping, trees all around the building, but there's no irrigation. So one of the requirements is that we're going to have to run irrigation all over both campuses for the landscaping. They will actually count our trees, and if what is there does not meet the city minimums, then they will require additional trees and additional vegetation. We weren't planning on doing an irrigation system. But
How
that's,
much does an irrigation system cost?
well, it depends on how extensive it has to be. It can be anywhere for as easy as $5,000 up to $100,000. That's what we've got to determine through their process, how extensive. Are you going to let us just do drip beds in the front of the building? Do I have to run them out to every tree? When we did Oakland Middle, there's an irrigation line that goes from the school all the way back to the back property lines, about 300 yards, with connection heads every so many feet. It has to be maintained, drained in the winter. There's a lot of other things that, other than the city of Murfreesboro, we don't do irrigation. But, and it's because I put in the contract, the contractor's on the hook for 2 years to making sure our plants live. They make it 2 years, unless we hit a severe drought or 5 degrees, typically they're going to make it. So irrigation's one, paving, parking, they're discussing traffic studies at Riverdale for Warrior Drive now. They do not think we have adequate queuing on our property. There's too many cars out on the streets, so there's a possibility they may make us add additional
Like a
traffic
turn lane or
storage
something?
on the road, on our campus. Could be, fairly costly. We're having to add a third access point to Riverdale and Oakland. Going to have a pretty major cost. At Riverdale, it's going to be up close to the neighborhood, and it's going to snake around behind the softball field and go around back. Kind of similar at Oakland, for emergency only. I don't necessarily know that that's necessarily a bad thing, but they're again, additional cost. We're going through their permitting process. I have to look at my calendar because I've got like a series of meetings. You have to go to, first step is Board of Zoning Appeals. Even though there's already a school there, to add on to it because it's in a neighborhood, we have to go through to the Board of Zoning Appeals to request to build the annex. Once that's done, then you move on to planning, and there's, it's over. You basically 2 or 3 steps each month, and it's a 3 to 4 month process.
When do we go to the Board of Zoning?
Let me look at my calendar. We do one school in the next week to 10 days, and then the other one is like a week after it.
So I have a question. In the estimation that that was said for this project, for the proposal for one addition a year ago, I'm sure the number's up now. Was that part of that estimate, the zone exemption, the road study, the irrigation, I know was a surprise, but I would think that some of that will have been done on the front end, the road study, the traffic analysis.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
I can answer that. So part of what slowed us down is we didn't get funding. And so we didn't get funding. And so when the county commission didn't fund us at that point, it slowed everything down.
Okay,
So more outside of that, we had no funding to build anything.
gotcha.
We didn't have the funding, and that's why we finally got asked for approval to start the design, because we knew these steps were coming, and until we got the design started, we can't go to these steps.
But the estimate, when we're going.
You talking about cost estimate?
Yeah, so when we're going to before the county commissioners for the proposal.
We haven't gone, we've given them an estimate.
Right, you gave them an
We have not gone for
Right.
final approval yet.
I understand that, but, I understand that, but was that part of the estimate?
What was what
The
part of it?
road study, the zone exemptions, I know the aeration piece of it. I'm just trying to understand that.
Is the cost taken care of?
Yes, in the
For an
estimate
irrigation
for the
system,
project.
no, ma'am.
I know that, and I said that was a surprise, I get that. But the road, like the traffic study, if there's going to be entry points that we need, that was going to create more development on our end because of the way the addition is going to be built. Those kind of things, I'm not an expert, but I would think as we're looking to do our due diligence on our end for the Beatty property, we're looking at a road study, things like that. Is that part of the due diligence process when we're doing additions?
Typically with additions, you're not required to do traffic studies. Typically. It's only for new construction.
The last annex that we built at Oakland and Riverdale, we didn't have to go through this process, right? Been back 2008, I guess, or
Well, that would have been 2006. Yes, we did.
we didn't have to do it? Okay.
But we didn't do a traffic study, to my knowledge, but I was just starting then.
Going back to the Beatty property, other than possible sewer connection, what's the benefit to be annexed into the city?
There is none, in my opinion. We have county fire, we have county EMS, we have, all those kind of things. It's no different than Rockville or Kittrell or Las Casas, Walter Hill, those locations.
So if Oakland and Riverdale had never been annexed to begin with, we wouldn't be going through all this hoopla and that.
Yes, sir.
There's a huge benefit by not being annexed into the city.
Right, that's what we've got to figure out if the sewer is going to be a problem.
Well, I think what I'm hearing, I'm going to pursue and try and get us an estimate by Thursday night and get prepared to do the testing prior to making application.
Yeah.
I would like to know, I'm just going to say this. As a lifelong resident of Rutherford County, the city needs to work with us better than this. This is very upsetting to me. This is very distressing, and this shouldn't happen because all of the city school kids are going to end up at our county schools.
That's right.
And we need to be partners, and they need to work with us. And this does not settle with me very well.
And the schools are really nice at the city.
This does not involve the city school system. I want to put that out there.
What?
This does not involve the city school system.
no.
so-
Right,
No,
correct.
not
No,
at
this
all,
does
no.
not involve that, correct. But it's just, I think it's just a frustration that we're trying to accommodate kids that are going to eventually come into the system, the county eventually, because it only goes up through 6th grade, and we're having to go through quite a few hooplas over it.
And Riverdale and Oakland have been there since 1972. You would have thought they would have been grandfathered in and not have to do some of this stuff.
Okay, number 3.
Wait a minute, let me
hold on,
finish. Veterans Parkway.
Yes, that-
Don, will you pull that drawing up? Okay, what you see on Veterans Park, what you see, that's the property at Veterans Parkway, and what we did is our engineer, I asked him to do a preliminary, this is not etched in stone, how could we get a building on that property? That is a middle school, which is what we discussed for Veterans Parkway was a middle school. That is our one-story layout. Instead of facing veterans, it faces a frontage road. If we were to not purchase all of that property, the owner would probably have to do some type of development in the back, which we would, whether it's city or county, I felt like they would want us to extend what I'm going to call our frontage road to that property line. Kind of standard, all the municipalities would request that.
We did that at Rocky Ford,
Yeah, we
correct?
did that at Rocky Ford. So that's kind of what you see. And then where they show the roads and the lots, that's just a guess at our part, just to show that the owner could still do some type of residential development there with that, or sell it to someone else that could do residential development. The other thing that we discussed is maybe we buy it all and there's some type of, one of these CTE buildings that's on our 5-year building plan. We use that property for something like that. So there's some further discussion whether we want to buy a part or at all. And that's not what tonight is. Tonight was to show you that yes, we can get a middle school on there. We can get the practice fields like we normally have. There is access to city sewer right there at the corner.
But has it been annexed in? Or will we have to go through the whole thing like?
Same thing.
They'll want it annexed.
It'll be in an annex, okay.
But there is sewer right there on our, there's a manhole right there on the corner. The only caveat is based on the property we've been, in the last 4 years, everything we've looked at, we wanted to make sure that we're able to expand it, which was not done in the past. With the shape of that lot, we could get 4 out of the 6 wings we could do an expansion on. The back 2 we could not based on the way the property's shaped. So there would still be an opportunity to get 12 additional classrooms, design it so that we could come back and do that, similar to what we did at Rockvale. We did 22 there, but we could do 16 here, which would still be pretty good to be able to expand it a little bit if we wanted to. Just want to make sure that that's there. I have had conversations with the owners. They have requested $82,000 an acre. I did tell them, same thing, that if we were to move forward, that we would need to do an appraisal of the property to get, a fair market value, and they were willing to go, for us to go through that process.
How many acres?
That right there, they've got about 50. We would probably be looking at 30 to 35 if we did not buy all of it.
The total is 50, but we're looking at 30.
It's a little over 50 acres right now. With what you see there, we're proposing to develop somewhere between 30 and 35.
And they're requesting $82,000 an acre.
Yes.
So that's more than what was requested at the Beatty property. Has anyone done any comps to look at what is available out there in that area?
We've got to vote on that first.
Yep.
I'm sorry?
So that would have to be voting and funding. We don't have funding for any of that,
We
right?
don't have funding for any of that. And that I'm just,
Just bringing
Sure,
up
no, I
property.
appreciate that you're telling us all this, but $82,000 per acre, that's more than where we're looking at for the other ones, so pleasantly surprised.
Number 3.
All right, so number 3, 5-year building program discussion and direction. So you have 2 options. So the role of the director of schools and our staff is to make recommendations to the board, and then the board can do as they see fit with those recommendations. I know the board last year kind of created their own 5-year plan, so that's, of course, at the discretion of the board if you so choose. As I mentioned at our last meeting, Health and Education has requested us to submit to them an updated 5-year plan so they have an idea of what they are looking at from a funding standpoint. We do need to adopt that at the latest by I guess it would be at our next meeting, to at least tell them what they need to do to go to the bond market. If they want to go to the bond market in March, then we have to have it approved by our board in February, to go to Health and Ed in February, to go to Budget in February, to hit the County Commission by March. So we've got 2 options here, and you guys have seen this. I emailed to you. We can talk about it again. I just really wanted you to have it. One option includes what the County Commission agreed to approve last year to fund, was Riverdale, Smyrna, and Oakland. And you will see the new changes having a new elementary school on the west side. We don't necessarily have property yet. We're looking at property, but that would be my first recommendation. If we moved on that quickly, and talking with Trey, and we used our current design, we could probably get an elementary school. Everything goes the way we need to, open by August of '24. Option 2 includes a little bit different. Option 2 takes out, it includes Riverdale, Smyrna, and Oakland, but it removes the elementary school addition, because my job is to give options. If the county chooses not to fund a new elementary school, we still have needs to do something at Stewart's Creek and Blackman. I know none of us want the additions, but I've got to give you proposals on both scenarios. In that scenario, you will see that it moves up some high schools, removes some things, makes Laverne High School more of a renovation instead of an addition, which in talking to their principal and their staff, I think that's something that they're looking at. Basically, what they both come down to over the next 5 years is 2 elementary, 2 middle, and 2 high schools, which accommodates between 7,000 and 8,000 students, which is roughly what we add every 5 years. What hurts us, and when you see the price tag, is that last year we had no new buildings. And so we took everything from last year and added yet another year on top of it. And you'll see at the bottom, there are a couple things we have the opportunity for. Grant funded, you see a CTE Inner North and CTE Center South. That was something that the previous board wanted us to look at, was to find a way that students could attend various CTE programs, not based on where they were zoned. We haven't had that discussion as this board, but I would assume it's probably pretty similar, so that students weren't just based on a zone, based on what program you could have. We have a Innovative Schools grant, Innovative School Models grant, is that right? ISM grant from the State Department that would allow us to fund some of this, at least one facility, if not 2. That would take most of our funding, and I know some of our schools would like to have programming. We are so far ahead in programming compared to most districts. I would much rather look at that to see what could we do to give options to all students so it didn't matter where they look at. The other portion is TISA. You'll see I have Alternative Schools / Rutherford County Learning Academy. That Rutherford County Learning Academy is more centered around the type of center we have with Rutherford Academy right here that serves some of our severe special needs. Not sure how much longer that facility is going to be an option for us. We hear rumblings and rumors of that facility not necessarily being around this time next year, and they are not able to serve the majority of our students anyways. I think we've all talked about long-term, we need a way to be able to do that in-house. It wouldn't be enough that we would need just one school for it, but we open up alternative seats. You see, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And I think what we're spending.
Absolutely, we are spending a fortune to send students there.
Yeah.
Yes. And the last thing is I have TISA possibility, because we are getting extra funding, and that's something I have to be aware of, is this is a need. It's not a need that we can probably go say, hey, County Commission, we need extra alternative school seats tomorrow with our other needs. If we're getting extra funding, though, it is good to show the County Commission that extra funding, we are trying to take care of some of our needs as well. Otherwise, they can't necessarily attack and take money from one source of revenue, but they can from another. So we want to show that we're good stewards. And happy to have discussion, but I want you guys to have this before we have the next discussion. Yeah.
One other thing, Dr. Sullivan, I've been kind of kicking around, and I've had a conversation or two with a couple of board members. We have older buildings, and we have capital projects, which kind of addresses a lot of HVAC, roofs, what I call general maintenance type things. There may need to be a separate 5-year plan to begin to look at some of these older schools, and I'm going to call them more than capital projects, paint the walls and put floor tile up and keep a roof on it. Relook at how do, and maybe they stay just like they are as far as grade levels go, but they don't flow very well. So what could we do to renovate, facelift, fix up, get them another 20 years type of look, which we haven't necessarily looked at in the past. We've been focused on new and addition and
Deferred maintenance.
keeping them like you would at home. Maybe I keep my walls painted. But we haven't necessarily looked at those facilities, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an older facility. Let's say the demographic of an area has really changed over the years, and the school's actually in pretty good shape, but to make it better suited to meet our students, we want to make a change. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I'm just throwing it out there as the problem's always been, and Mr. Young's already grinning, the problem's always been we haven't been able to go ask for something like this because we've always been tied down with building. Now, since 2006, when I became employed here, it hadn't changed. We're still chasing that proverbial rabbit, which is the growth. And we have When I first came here, Mr. Gill told me, he said, one of the things you're going to do for me is you're going to help me get rid of portables. We're getting out of the portable business. And I truly believe that's what he thought. Nobody saw this continuing 15, 16 years down the road, but it has. And the problem was we were behind then, and we're about in the same position, if not more so today, even with everything that we've done. So
Yeah, our
I'm just
growth-
kind of throwing that out there for conversation.
Our growth is only worsened, it hadn't gotten any better, so it has definitely made it more challenging. Going back to this 5-year building plan, if we're looking at these first 4 or 5 projects, There's
Option
a-
one, Mr. Coy?
well, either one, the new elementary school is the only thing that would be open by August 24.
Correct.
So why would we require funding all this next budget year? Why couldn't we break some of that funding up? For
That would be up to the county commission. They've done that in the past. How they borrow the money is not something that we've done. You could probably borrow half of those 3 projects in the first year and then borrow the other half the second year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I could look at it based on months and do a projection, but yes, that has been done in the past.
What would hurt us there is that then the next year's projects get delayed. We're not, but I agree, I don't know that they're gonna, they have the ability, our county commission does a good job of funding what they can with our current revenue stream, and I just don't know they have anymore.
The only next year project would be the new middle school, right, that you're talking about?
You
additions.
and Laverne High School.
Laverne High.
If we removed Blackman, you'd still have Laverne.
Well, we don't have those open up to August 26, so,
Correct.
I mean, everything would just shift a year.
Down.
So, as far as the funding goes, the completion dates would still stay the same.
Can I ask,
Happy County.
I think you had said this before, that that they requested this and that we can come back and adjust this
Absolutely.
after we get the results from the study?
Absolutely, and I would expect us to.
Okay.
'Cause I would expect us to have to move some things around based on what, because you know, we do have seats, the seats aren't in great spots, but what can we do to adjust this?
I will say, it's concerning to me going to the county commission with this, with nothing on here in regards to some of the older schools. One of the things we put on our plan at our retreat was to make our schools as equitable as possible across the county. And I'm just going to say this, I don't know any other way to say it other than it kind of bothers me if we're going to continue to build schools with great auditoriums and all this stuff. Not that I don't want them, but if we're going to spend that money and then tell our older schools that we don't have money for them, it's not a fair playing field to have extras when other schools aren't getting what they need as kind of a bare bones. And I think some of our older schools too, it's affecting some of the access and things that they have for technology and different things, if I'm not mistaken as well. I don't know, because I've not done this before, whether it's more appropriate to combine some of the older schools into this building plan or to keep it as a separate thing. My only concern would be going to the commission with only new buildings, because then there is no way to come back and ask for money for something else later.
And just from my experience advocating for Laverne, it's had a real effect in hiring teachers. And it is a morale issue with our students. And the North End, for a long time, in my opinion, nobody has to agree with me, has been left out. So, but this is a working document.
Yes,
And there's some other things, Dr. Sullivan and I have talked, I've sent y'all an email today about a trip and looking at some other things. So we're going to get a comprehensive plan together. And it may be a 5, a 10, and a 15-year plan, but that is my plan for all of us to get together with some other people and to get a plan together so the county commissioners will know we're not going to piecemeal this. They're going to know what the future looks like and what our vision needs to be, because I'm just telling y'all, looking at these documents and the enrollment study, once we finish the 2 elementary, the 2 middle, the 2 high schools, we're going to need 4 more schools. So that's not enough. We've got to go out more, and we've got to have a better vision from just, because in my opinion, as soon as we turn this over to them, it's obsolete or it's out of date. So,
Would it be possible to move forward potentially with one of these plans and then use, because aren't we going to have a surplus from TISA, like 50 million, 40 million, something like that?
We will, so we won't have a full estimate probably until April at the earliest. 50 was our original, but you also have to remember we're 20-something million in the deficit this year in operations.
and is that for 4 years or 5 years?
5.
Because I had a discussion with Representative Sparks today, and he thought someone on the county commission had told him that after the 5 years that it was going to continue. And that has not been my understanding. And to me, this little sugar that they're giving us up front is a little bit of Novocaine for the root canals that the county is going to have to take after they stop giving us those funding. So what I'm saying in plain English is the county is going to be responsible for more funding of our schools.
Agree.
Yeah, and to build off that same point, what I was going to say is if we use that TISA funding to better some of our older schools, then we're not using it on reoccurring funds.
Correct. That is correct. Where it's going to hurt us is what the governor used to do with his budget would say, let's say we're doing a 3% raise for teachers across the board. That'll be built into TISA now. And so you have that give and take as well. Yeah.
And there's some restrictions right now on TISA on what that money can and cannot be used. And so I know we're getting a surplus, but I'm not sure if we can use that money for the buildings to serve for the purpose of renovations. So there's some caveats there. But going back to the Beatty property for a second, in the bond market, when are we supposed to when does the 140-day contingency expire? When does that expire?
You talking about our due diligence period? Mm-hmm. It's like the first or second week in March.
March 15th.
The first week of March.
Yeah, I'm
March 15th.
I'm working toward an end date of the end of February for my stuff, because it's the first, second week in March.
Okay. So if everything comes back in February and then they're going to the bond market in March, do we know what day in March?
That's up to the county commission.
That's up to the
It
county.
would be after the county commission meeting in March, which would be,
It will be what day?
let me pull that up, it's usually the 3rd week. Probably the 16th, let me just check.
So it'll be after March 16. So we will,
No, March 9th.
I'm sorry?
March 9th,
March 9th. So
which is why we need to have it done before February because they're meeting on the same night we are.
yes. So we will need to make a decision about this by the end of February, more than likely.
You gotta go to Health and Ed the end of
First,
February
yeah.
at budget.
So when is that meeting in February for Health and Ed?
It's the fourth Tuesday after the first Monday.
29th.
Should be the 28th. Yep, 28th.
Okay, so then I guess if we're not meeting, we'll have a special session to vote on this once all the pieces come together.
I can't
Maybe.
imagine they're going to fund all 4 anyways.
Yeah.
I would love to tell you that I think they will.
No, but we have the funding.
We have to
buy
send it.
the property if we need to.
Yes.
It's not coming from the county
Yeah.
commissioner.
Yeah.
We already have that money, yeah.
We already have that money. That's not coming from them. Number 4.
All right, so in moving to number 4, CMTA ESPC funding. So CMTA is the company, so I want to make sure I clarified that because there's a lot of abbreviations here. ESPC is the type of grant, so that's the funding request. I request that we table this, so there's some more information that we need to do. There's a couple things I need to look at. One is we've asked for today for an example of a contract for 10, 15, and 20 so that our board can have that before officially voting on it to see what would make sense. The other thing is that we are going through, you'll see that there's a new addition, so Tennessee's Comptroller's Office is required to approve this by a 2021 new law that was updated for Tennessee Code Annotated 924-101. So we need to have all 3 contracts, then we need to write the contracts to see if the comptroller would approve them, then we'll bring them to you to see if that's an area that you want to go. Overall, with districts, I've talked to lots of districts. They are very supportive of this work because it allows them to fund deferred maintenance without having to go to capital, without having to go to their county commission and ask for extra funding. It's a way of using their own funding to pay for some things. Our local huge district to the west of us, that is very affluent, has used this quite a bit over the last couple of years, granted with a different vendor, but has had a lot of success.
That's great. That's awesome.
How long are you looking at tabling that until?
I'm hoping we can have everything by the next meeting in February. I'm hopeful.
Number 12.
All right, number 12, financial matters. So in looking through this, these are our, we like to call them mid-year cleanups, but just like you do with your budgets personally, some things cost more, some revenue comes in different, and so these are just mid-year cleanups. So number 1, centralized cafeteria fund, budget amendment fund 143, this fiscal year 22-23 centralized cafeteria fund amendment is to increase equipment and supply line items due to prior year encumbrances becoming actual expenditures in this current fiscal year. It also amends those lines to cover higher costs for current equipment replacement and supplies. A portion of this amendment was prior year obligated money that rolled into our fund balance and being allocated to respective line items to cover prior year obligations that are now current year actual expenditures. And so you will see it is taking $150,000 out of fund balance for our 143, which is our capital, or which is our cafeteria, and moving it into expenditures. Brian, anything you want to add to that? How much do we have in there? Any idea? You have that on Thursday?
In fund balance.
Yep, in 143.
I can give you a more accurate number on Thursday, but there's somewhere between 14 million right now, somewhere like that.
So we have well enough to cover this. We are over $400,000 in bad meal debt. And so just to keep that, in meeting with Commissioner Swin on Friday, she brought up that it's all Middle Tennessee superintendents, and she was talking about just meal prices for introduced lunch, and she specifically said, Rutherford County, especially on the north end of your county, as you continue to add students, some of those being undocumented students, you will have higher expenditures because they're going to have some reluctance to fill out that free introduced lunch form, which if you look at our bad meal debt of where our students, yes, that's our highest poverty, but that is also where we have some of our highest amounts, which makes sense in line with what she said.
We talked about, I know this is not part of the discussion, but since you brought up the meal debt, and it just popped in my brain, we talked about hiring a grant writer. Where are we at with that status?
Posted.
Oh, it's posted?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Have you had any interest?
Do you know if we had any interest yet, Greg? Because we've had internal discussions about what department best to go into as well.
Is it going to legal?
Transportation.
It's not going in.
Not on transportation.
Is it going to legal?
It'll probably go to instruction, which is actually probably under Dr. Goyen. Even though he's federal programs, he doesn't really do federal, it's more state programs, and that seemed like the best. We talked about putting it in finance, but finance then isn't going to understand the operations side of it. So
Okay.
it's going to be a unique unicorn we're looking for. So,
Unicorn.
yep.
Number 2.
All right, number 2, 141 general purpose school budget amendment. So this amendment, budget amendment cleans up expenditure line items at mid-year. On the revenue side, the budget is amended to reflect collections of disproportionalities from IDEA federal funds. On the expenditure side, the larger items of this cleanup amendment reflect the higher cost and demand of custodial supplies, school maintenance supplies, and instructional support materials and supplies. Also, adjustments to salary lines include additional approved positions not originally budgeted or transferring salaries to correct account numbers. This amendment has a net increase of both current year revenue and expenditures of $375,000 with no use of fund balance. So to kind of walk through that a little bit, we are under the last, 4 or 5 years disproportionality, which means we have some type of disproportionate discipline with some subgroup in our district that happens to fall under IDEA with special education. And so we have to divert some of those funds to our general purpose to actually address disproportionality that we have to do every single, is it 15%? Is that right, Brian? 15% of our IDE funds have to come to address disproportionality. The other next ones of that are custodial supplies, and so custodial supplies has been a requested budget increase the last couple of years. It's never been increased. We will make that modification this year. Trey's team makes the request, it never gets funded, and every year we come back and add money to it. And We're doing that yet again, of about $1 million to cover through some of that. And then the next one, that last one said also adjustments to salary lines include additional approved positions. Those are like the 7 ESL positions that the board approved back in September. This is cleaning that up because we have increased revenue and increased expenditures. All that to say it equals out to 0, so we're right in line. And you hopefully won't see another big one of these. You'll see a huge one in June, correct? Is our end of the year.
June.
Yep.
First time using
First time using the mic. There we go.
We're going to have a microphone class
Yeah.
Thursday night.
Great.
Even though the light's on, it still doesn't work.
Yeah, end of May, 1st of June timeframe, somewhere around there.
But overall, we're still budget neutral with this amendment, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, number 13?
Yeah, the financial report we just went over. The only thing I would add is that the principal budget requests, they're supposed to have to be submitted by the end of the day tomorrow. That is new for us, so every principal will meet with our leadership team here and submit those requests to us, and then we will go through every line by line of where those things go. It takes us about 2 weeks, and we have them scheduled every 45 minutes for the next 2 weeks, but it'll be good for principals to get feedback on that. It's a huge lift, but it's something that we needed to do. And that gets us into insurance. You don't mind, I'll go ahead and go to that.
Please.
So insurance, I think Mr. Young had texted me a question about what is the savings that we should be in moving from our county plan to the state plan. We won't know a specific number until payroll runs for certified staff later this week and administrators next week. So by our February one, we'll have a better idea. We should save several million, and we would hope to be able to reallocate that back to our staff, which is where that should go if we're saving. And hopefully they will see that they are getting better service as well. Dr. Anthony, anything you want to add to
The
that?
thing we need to consider there is we need to make sure you can put money in a trust and make sure that these retirees are covered. Because that's one thing that we're still struggling with a little bit here. And I want to make sure our retirees never lose one benefit that we promised them.
Agree.
So we need to make sure that's taken care of first.
Don't worry.
And then
This board is very supportive of those retirees, and it is appreciated. We are having trouble with the Medicare Advantage plan. Still being chewed out pretty frequently, but that's okay.
So,
I just send it to Dr. Anthony.
yes. So Sheila and I have been working with the group that as they have complaints on the county general plan, not the state plan. We have not had any complaints on those who've moved to the state plan. And Mr. Elam has been addressing those today. We were saving those for our county insurance meeting coming up this month. But after having an influx yesterday, we've been turning those over for Mr. Elam to address, and he's been able to address all but one, which was a major one that we received last night.
And I can give you an update on the state insurance plan for current employees on Thursday because Declan goes for a checkup and he's very expensive. So I'll let you know what they say on Thursday.
Well, I heard just from one employee that the state plan saved them at least $5,000 a year.
It's awesome.
That's a huge increase. And a lot of credit goes back to everyone that fought for this. I mean, even our previous guys, Doug Beaudry, even Mr. Spurlock, fought hard for this, and they need to be recognized. And I feel like that we need to do our due diligence and make sure that we set this up in a way that we cover our retirees. I would also encourage us to even look at our workers' comp and see if, by moving it to the state plan, is there not some savings there?
Good idea.
Director's update, all I have is the enrollment summary. I gave you a copy of that. I alternate each month between giving you a summary by demographics and a summary by grade level by school. This is school demographics. It is School Board Appreciation Week, starts next week, so you guys will start noticing some things. We have it split out over the first couple weeks from each of our schools to show appreciation for all that our school board members do, and then I will have the rest of it on Thursday.
You want to go Thursday? Yeah. Okay. General discussion.
I have a general discussion. So I met with the instruction department last Friday, and they shared with me some statistics in regards to the third grade retention when it comes down to Rutherford County specifically. And so I just think it'd be good for us to hear how that will apply to our district. So if Dr. Chastain, if you can share those numbers and explain those numbers, what you're sharing of what we're looking at potential.
So these are just numbers we were trying to get our heads around how many we need to plan for. And based on the law as currently written. So to include below and approaching, and with our best guess of exemptions, we would be looking at 1,271. If we were looking at just below, and again, taking out our best guess at exemptions, we'd be looking at around 391. So that's not taking into account possible retests or anything like that. That was just using last year's data to try to project where we might be worst case scenario wise. So where our team landed was to plan for 1,050 third graders in those summer camps. Again, not trying to kind of overestimate just so we're prepared logistically, but just to give you an idea, that gives you an idea of what we're trying to plan for in terms of our personnel.
And that's as the law currently is applied. So there's looking at potentially the 1,271 kids that could potentially be held back.
Yeah, with below and approaching combined, so as our current law, and that is taking into account students that are currently ESL and our students with disabilities. So that's with them removed. So that is 43% of our third grade.
Can you give them the number of the students with that include the whole mix that doesn't take away the restrictions so that you can get even a better understanding of how narrow that gap really isn't?
1,887, so that's 64%.
So that's quite a bit of a jump between those two numbers. So I just thought it'd be a great idea for us to really hear from a district standpoint view where we potentially could stand as the law states. I know they're looking at wanting to change, making an amendment, and based upon these numbers, I agree there should be some amendments to the law to look at how the projections should be, because the majority of it is on the approaching side, and it doesn't necessarily mean, as the law states, that these kids cannot read. The law looks at it more of a reading as a skill versus the TCAP looks at it more in the standards, and that's where that's where it doesn't go in line with each other. So if we have conversations with our state reps and our senators, we need to think about these numbers and how it really impacts our district. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And everything you guys shared with me that day was very, very informational.
We're happy to have those conversations with anyone. So
Yes,
just if you would like additional numbers or information, let us know.
And I think everyone should meet with the instruction department and have those conversations because they have more to explain and share.
Any other discussions or comments? I have one, and it's coming from the audience. And if you want to come on up. We have a special treat. Let's see where she's going. So,
I know where she's going.
it's a birthday. So you didn't get a card, but you did get a special homemade cake from
Ariana.
So,
Okay, taking her home, no problem.
because you need more grandkids, right? So, everybody
man.
wish Ms. Bratton a happy birthday. I'm sorry I did
Thank
not
you.
get you a card.
Oh, that's
I
okay.
apologize, but her
Okay,
birthday
Dr.
was the
Sullivan didn't tell
15th.
me happy birthday either.
So,
That's all right.
if there's no opposition, we're going to be adjourned.
Thank you. Now look at this. Oh, look how sweet.
Look at this.
I'm not being rude, I'm